Hi, everybody. This is Jordan Boyd, and I'm a professional comic book colorist. I've been asked to do a brief kind of demo of everything that goes into coloring a comic book illustration. So I'm just going to go ahead and hop right in here. Okay, so an artist named Chris Somney has given me permission to use a sketch that he did of a character from comic book series written by Greg Rucka called Queen and Country. This is the main character from that series, Tara Chase, who's a British spy. Anyway, so part of my job is to look at an image initially and kind of decide what kind of mood or tone I want to go for. You know, this is just a sketch. It's not associated with any particular story. So I can kind of do whatever I want with this. So I'm going to table that for now. That'll come back when I get into making more creative decisions. The first step upon getting any piece of line art from an editor or a collaborator is to set up the file so that you can start coloring. So as you can see here, I have a black and white illustration just in its original layer. I need to make it so that the black line art is on its own layer so I can start coloring beneath it and then do other things later. So to get started, and I'm going to try and share as many keyboard shortcuts as possible as I do this, because I would get literally a tenth of what I get done in a given week done if it weren't for how much time keyboard shortcuts save me. And unfortunately, I know most of my audience that are going to be watching this initially are Mac users. I'm on Windows. I'm going to give the Windows keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to try and tell you what it's doing so you can look up the proper keyboard shortcut for yourself. So anyway, I'm going to start by selecting all, which I can either hit Control A, or I can come up to select all up here. And this is actually handy. All of these menu options will give you the keyboard shortcut off to the side here. So if I fail to say something like what keyboard shortcuts I'm using, go up there and check it out. Okay, so I've selected all. I'm going to cut and paste this into a channel. You can first, let's just come up here and do Edit, Cut, which I've got a weird color selected. I'll fix that in a second. Come over to your Channels palette. Channels, in addition to being where the different channels of a color digital image are stored, can also be a place where you save selections for later. So I have hit the Create New Channel button here, and I'm going to hit Control V to paste that in there, or you could have come up here, Edit, Paste. What this does is it keeps a copy of the line art in a place where we can't mess it up as we move forward. I'm going to double click on the name there and change this to line-art. Let me go fix the color that I put in here on accident. One of the things that I use constantly as a keyboard shortcut, I honestly don't even know. I guess it would probably be under Edit somewhere. Edit Fill, maybe. Where I hit Alt Backspace to fill with the foreground color, which in this case would be black, or Control Backspace to fill with the background color, which the foreground color is the one in the front here. The background is the one in the back here, if you can see where my mouse is gesticulating wildly. And then it's, yeah, like I said, Control Backspace to fill with the background color. But I don't want either of these colors. I want white. To reset the background and foreground color to black and white, you can hit D on your keyboard. So now white is the background color, so I'm going to hit Control Backspace to fill with white. Okay, so now blank canvas. Really getting somewhere now. Okay, so we're going to hop back over to our channels, and to actually use the selections, that'll make more sense as we go forward. When I say saving selections, that may mean nothing to you. It will, hopefully, by the end of this. You can either right-click on the channel that you're wanting to use, or you can highlight it and come down here to this kind of dotted kind of circle icon down here, which is basically select the contents of this channel. Same thing. You can either control click or hit this button right here, which I didn't have it selected. Hit that button, and it's selected. Okay. Also, other keyboard shortcuts to remember with selections, and I use these all the time. And you can again find the options in the menu up under the select menu. Control H to hide. That means it's still there, but I don't want to see the marching ants. So Control H toggles whether or not you can see the selection, and Control D is to deselect. So I've literally gotten rid of the selection there. And both of those can be, I think, found up in here somewhere. But that's, again, Control D to deselect, Control H to hide and reveal. So I'm going to select the line art channel by holding Control and clicking on it. And then we're going to go back over here to the layers, create a new layer. And see, we can't just fill immediately because in channels, what's white is what's selected, not what's dark. But keeping the image where we can understand it is easier. So you just have to remember to invert your selection, which means to reverse what is selected. So if we filled this with black right now, it would be an inverted image. What we want is the opposite. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. You could also come up here to edit, undo, or step backward, depending on how far you need to go back. To invert the selection, you can either come up here to select, inverse, or as it shows here, Control Shift I, which is what I do because keyboard shortcuts save you time, and time is money. So now if I use that Alt backspace to fill with the foreground color, which happens to be pure black, we have the line art all by itself on a new layer. So totally like the white is transparent, and the black is there by itself. Now, what I do here next is, well, let's name that layer for one thing. And two, these little buttons above the actual list of layers are going to be used a lot in this tutorial. So the first one is locks transparency. That basically means that if I wanted to make the black some other color, if I wanted to paint part of this line art a different color, it would, with that turned on, whatever I do will not go outside what is already opaque in the layer. So this is me trying to color outside the lines, and I can't. It's because the transparency is locked to what already exists. The other thing I do is lock position, which is this kind of 4 arrows icon here. And that's so that if I have the move tool selected, I can't accidentally drag the line art out of alignment with what we're going to do later. So I always turn on both of those with my line art. So this is kind of we're getting there. This is all getting kind of set up. So one thing that a lot of people don't understand about comic book coloring is that it's not as simple as just taking the paint bucket tool, picking a color, and saying, I want to fill her hair in. Oh, of course, I have my transparency locked. Let's say I wanted to fill the hair in. Well, the hair is not enclosed in a perfectly black outline. Not to mention, this line art is aliased. It is not pure black and pure white. There's these little kind of slightly grayish pixels in between that actually give it a softer look. Some artwork in comics in a professional environment is aliased where it's pure black and white. A lot of it isn't. In any case, it's not as simple as saying, I want her shirt to be this color, and clicking with the paint bucket tool. That I had it. I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so you can see it doesn't do a very good job, and it leaves all these cruddy edges that don't look good. So you can't just use the paint bucket. And I've had very smart people who should know better tell me that that's all they thought comic book coloring was. So since we can't do that, we need to reliably be able to fill different parts of this image in with colors and then be able to change them later without affecting the rest of the image. And to do that, we have to have what are called flats. Flats are a way of, like we have channels to save certain selections, flats are a more visual way of saving different selections for all the different parts of this image. So if I just wanted to color the chair, I could just color the chair. If I just wanted to color her shirt, I could just color her shirt. etc. To do this, you need to get good with both the lasso and the magic wand tools in Photoshop. But before you get started, there's a couple settings you need to tweak so you don't mess things up. And this is, I cannot stress how important this is. One, with the lasso tool, make sure feathering is at 0 pixels and anti-aliasing is checked off. Cannot stress how important this is, and I'll get to why in a minute. And I'll also explain why I prefer having this of the 4 options here for the selection kind of behavior. I always choose to add to the selections that I'm making. So let's say I draw a lasso selection. I don't, you could always hold down shift like in regular mode here. If I started to draw another selection, it would get rid of what I'd already done. But if you wanted to add to it, you could hold down shift and add to it. But I know when I'm creating flats, I'm going to be doing this a lot. So I just turn it on so that anytime I draw anything, it adds to the selection no matter what. If you make a mistake, you can hold down Alt and subtract from a selection. That's another thing you're going to be using a lot. My keyboard wants to cooperate. There we go. And anyway, I'm not going to use this, so Control-D to deselect. All right. Those are the settings that I use on the lasso tool. Also, other cool trick with the lasso tool, some people may think that they want to use the polygonal lasso tool, which only deals in straight lines. So it only does this kind of thing. The secret is actually to only use the regular lasso tool and hold down Alt while you're drawing to be able to do straight lines whenever you want. So some of these shapes are straight and some of them need curves. So, okay, I'll get to this. Will all make more sense here in a second. I'm just trying to get a bunch of preamble out of the way. So let's say we're doing an organic shape here and then we need a straight line. I'm going to hold down Alt and then magically I have a polygonal lasso tool until I release the Alt tool, the Alt key and start drawing again. That is super useful, and I use it all the time without even thinking about it. So if you're seeing me draw a bunch of organic shapes and then suddenly I'm doing polygonal in the middle of it, you know what the heck I'm doing. Okay, so magic wand tool, which I hit W to get. I hit L to bring up the lasso tool. I hit W to bring up the magic wand tool, or you can come over here if you're lame. So magic wand tool, again, on this one, tolerance needs to be 0. Anti-aliasing needs to be turned off, and you're going to be turning contiguous off and on, and I will explain contiguous here in just a second. Right now, I'm going to leave it clicked off, and instead of having the add to selection option or behavior selected here, I have what I think is called intersect, and what that means is that if I, you know what, I'm going to save that. We'll just remember to come back to it in a minute. The intersect behavior is very, it speeds up your flatting a whole lot. So what is flatting? Let's show how we do this. Okay, what we're going to end up with is something like this. This is what one of my assistants or like people that I pay to flat for me would provide. They have gone in and made selections for all the different parts of this image. So that I can select just her hair, just her shirt, etc. And I have them do it in these crazy colors because I don't want them to think that I'm going to use whatever colors they choose, because that's my job. Their job is just to make this layer for me that that makes my job easier. Now for this, I'm going to show a little bit about how to flat this yourself. And then I'm going to use the flats that I've already created for this image. Okay, so on the background layer, we're going to select our lasso tool, and with flatting, you always start with big shapes and break down details as you need them, because you want the flats to be clean and to kind of make sense. It makes things a lot cleaner and colorists' lives easier. A lot of people I know started off as colorists by flatting for other professionals before they could get work themselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making selections, and because I had that add to behavior selected, you stop for breaks occasionally because you don't want to accidentally get into the habit of like trying to make one giant selection for the whole image and then messing up halfway through. I have done this. It's not pleasant. And sometimes it can be like you'll be in the middle of it and realize, 15 minutes have gone by and I'm still making the same selection. And like, yeah, it's not the best way to do it. And I'm already kind of starting to do it, which is not good, but this is kind of a complicated shape. So again, I'm drawing the more organic parts in with the lasso tool, and then I'm holding down Alt pretty constantly to get these big straight areas. And we'll just keep making this big outline of kind of the main subject of this image, one big shape. And once we have all that, I'll just go ahead and walk through some of this. So keep going. We're going to do kind of a sloppy job. Precision is key here, but for speed's sake, I'm going to do this pretty quickly. Again, holding down Alt to change whether I'm making more freehand or organic selections versus holding down Alt to cover a bunch of area with straight lines. Let's just cut that off there. So I'm going to come back down here, swoop in, and make this all one big selection. So I'm just going to leave off this whole part. It just takes too long. Okay, so here's again where the keyboard shortcuts to fill with the foreground and background colors are going to come in handy. And if you're flatting for someone else, again, they probably prefer using rainbow colors, or you could start trying to figure out your color scheme at this stage. I'm going to do crazy rainbow colors, and we're going to talk about correcting flats later. So I'm just going to pick a random color. Something I haven't done that's kind of important is... Ooh, that's not good. I was doing that all in quick mask mode. I don't want to go into explaining that. Let me... All right, folks, I'm going to have to redo that selection. At some point, I had clicked Q, which puts me into something called quick mask mode, where you can see a selection as you're making it, and like what is selected will be clear and what is not selected will be kind of a reddish color. I'll show it to you in a second so you can understand what I'm talking about. But I didn't realize I was in that mode, and I thought I was still in black and white color space because it wasn't letting me pick a real color to fill with. If any of this is not making sense, that's okay. I'm kind of rambling to cover for a mistake at this point. So, flatting is the worst part of coloring. It's the most tedious and time-consuming, and the least fun, but at the same time, super necessary, especially if you're on a schedule, as I am constantly. I would not be able to do even a tenth of what I do in a given month if it weren't for having assistants that do my flatting for me. Because doing this on every page would tank my schedule, and if I did that, I would not be making nearly enough money to support my family. So, okay. Oh, that right there, that's quick mask mode. I just hit Q. It's a way. Oh, I see. I made a mistake here. It's a way to visually see what you have selected, and also you can edit your selection in this mode using things like your paintbrush or your pencil tool, which I'm going to do now to fill in this hole that I left. I don't have black selected. Again, just like in channels, what is black will not be selected and what is white will be, but there can be kind of more softer in-between stages which you could create with gray, which would ruin my flat, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to hit Q again to get us out of that mode, and you can see where I drew in that little bit is now no longer empty, or has been, or it's been filled in, the selection. Okay, so I have my big selection again, or at least partially. I left most of this off. Just picking a random color here. I'm gonna hit Alt Backspace to fill with this mustard brown mustard color. And so that's the big silhouette is kind of taken care of. I left another little area here messed up. Other shortcuts to learn immediately: Control minus and Control plus for zooming in and out. Control 0 to take you back to fit the whole thing into your screen. And when you're zoomed in, holding down on spacebar turns your cursor into the hand tool, so you can move around quickly. Because again, using these sliders is for chumps. The faster you can get out of the habit of even having to look and even realize they're there, the better you'll be at Photoshop. I encourage you to do that constantly. So anytime I'm zooming in or out, I'm hitting Control plus and minus or Control 0 to get the whole thing. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to the lasso tool, L, and now I'm going to start just separating the character from the chair. So I'm just interested in getting her separated from the chair, and I can get as messy as I want in the black areas of the image because they're going to be hidden. So but I see you saying, but Jordan, you just selected a bunch of white space that you don't want, and I'm getting too detailed there. I'll fix that in a second. Well, that's where that intersect setting on the magic wand is going to save our skins. So there's the character. Okay, so if we were to fill this with another random color, like a red, right now it would be all over the place, not what we want at all. So we just want to fill in where it's already yellow, which I'm going to refine that a little bit. We only want it where it's yellow. And so I'm going to hit W for the magic wand tool, and I'm going to have this intersect option turned on, which means that when I click on the yellow, anything inside the lasso selection that we made that's yellow is going to be selected, and everything that's not will be cut out. So now we just have the yellow, and that's saves so much time. Let's see. So now I'm going to fill her with the red, and you can start getting more and more detailed. Like that, you do big shape, go big to little, and so now it's her boot. So select the boot, going around all the torn fabric. Again, lasso, or use the magic wand with that one setting applied. Boop. So darker color. Anyway, and you just do this until you have everything in the entire image separated the way you want to. And you'll see, you can tell where there's kind of a cutoff along the border. This image kind of has a border. I'm going to use the rectangular marquee tool. I also have it set to intersect, just like the lasso tool. That comes in handy sometimes. I'm going to make a big selection here. While you're making a marquee selection, you can hold down spacebar to move it around. I do that pretty constantly. So I'm going to bring it all the way down. I'll just bring it right here. And I just want to fill in the white. So I'm going to hit the magic wand. It's got intersect set up, so I'm going to click on the white area, and only the stuff that's white will get selected. Boom. So I'll fill that with a nasty green. And we're on our way to having this whole thing flatted. I'm not going to keep going because I've already done this work. I just wanted you to see all the different things. Oh, one more. I said I was going to explain what contiguous meant. Contiguous means whether areas are connected, basically. So if I have the magic wand tool selected, and if contiguous is turned on, and I click on this area of yellow, it's only going to be the yellow that is off on its own over here. There is no connecting yellow pixels to connect all these yellow regions. So sometimes you just want one piece of something, not everything that is part of the chair. Like in this case, just this corner of the chair. So I'm going to hit Control D to deselect. With contiguous turned off, if I click on this color value, anywhere where it shows up on the layer, it will get selected. And to come back to why aliased versus anti-aliased edges is important, it's so that you can have 100% pure and reliable selections. If we were to say turn anti-aliasing on and draw a shape, fill with a color. Oh, what, did I turn it on? Oh, I didn't have it on the lasso tool. I had it on in the magic wand. That's going to come back to bite me if I don't fix it. Okay, let's do that again. So I've turned on anti-aliasing with my lasso tool, and I fill with that nasty green. You can see it created all these intermediate pixel colors. It makes it look nice, but when I select this again, and let's say I want to change the color to a blue, you're going to get this nasty green halo. That's what anti-aliasing does. So we always leave it off when we're flatting. So I'm going to turn it off now before I forget. Okay, so that's kind of an introduction to flatting. I already have this flatted into crazy rainbow colors. So I'm going to close this and open that copy up. This is what I would normally get from one of my assistants. And from here, I would start trying to figure out how I actually wanted this to look. So flats are still in the background layer. I'm going to, you can either right click and duplicate the layer, and then, or you can just hit Control J. It creates a copy for you. You don't have to do as much work. You can just flick your fingers on the keyboard and it does it for you, which is, of course, what I choose to do. So I'm going to rename that flats, and I'm going to actually take the fill percentage down all the way, and then I'm going to lock it. So what this has done is we now have a copy of our flats that is invisible, but we know it's there, and we can't accidentally mess it up because it's locked. And what I'm going to do here is not use any of these colors. So I'm going to start by selecting the white, because it's kind of the only thing that's not going to get touched. And I'm going to hit Control-Shift-I to invert that selection. So now it's got everything. You can hit Quick Mask to see what is selected again if you can't tell from the marching ants. And I'm going to fill this with a base color. I feel like since she's a spy, she's patched herself up. Like, I feel like she's just gotten back from a mission, but she also looks kind of pissed off, so maybe she's waiting for somebody that she's going to kill. I don't know. So, you know, the clouds look kind of murky, so I'm thinking this is like the end of the day or twilight or something. So do kind of a mysterious purple base tone, and I'm going to hit Control-Alt backspace to fill with that foreground color. Here's another use for channels and saving selections. Okay, so I'm going to click on the flats layer. Even though we can't see it, we know that we have everything separated because we did our job right. I'm going to have my magic wand, and I'm going to select the sky. And I'm going to hold down Shift, which would add to the selection. I'm going to click on the white. And I'm going to hit Control-Shift-I to invert that. Now we can fill, well, here's how I correct most of my flats. I'm not normally picking colors from my swatches. I'm normally finding what looks best by using the hue saturation adjustment, which you can either come up to image, oops, I'm on the wrong layer, image, adjustments, hue saturation, or as I like to do, Control U. And from here, we know she needs to be brighter than the background, so bump the brightness up a little bit. Probably, again, to make her stand out a little bit, I'm going to add some saturation. You could leave it here, but I'm going to give us some color contrast as well, so that you have all the different types of contrast. And it's kind of just finding what appeals to you, what sticks out. The pink is really makes a bold statement. Like, that would work really well on some, like maybe she's sitting under like a neon sign, or there's something lighting her from above, which I can kind of tell the lighting is coming from above based off some of the shadows. But I'm going to go, just for the few minutes I'm going to be correcting these, with kind of a cyan. Let's bump the saturation down a little bit, make it a little moodier. Okay, so we still have the selection of everything that's not the sky or the border. We may want to adjust everything, like this whole part of her again. So I like to save channels as these kind of selections. So so that I don't ever have to click on a bunch of stuff to get the selection again. So with that, just her and the chair and all that stuff selected, but not the background, come over here and you can hit this button right here, which is create new channel from selection. And what that does is saves that selection for later. And I do this whenever there's complicated, like sometimes I can get, this is not as complicated of an image, but on a really complicated, like packed image, like page where there's like 20 characters and they're all fighting each other and there's all kinds of different effects and parts of the background, like middle and foreground kind of elements. Like it's sometimes best to break down that complexity into big, bold shapes that you might want to affect all at once. And I could probably go one step further with the magic wand, hit the chair leg, and the parts of the first aid kit down here, holding down shift to add to those selections, blood thing. And I'm going to hit the background and the border again. Control Shift I. Hit Q to double check what you've done. And quick mask. Looks good. It's just her now, so it's not the chair, but it's just her. So save that by hitting this button here. So now if we just want to affect her, or want to affect her in the chair, and you can get crazy with this. I probably won't even use that much in this instance, but I want you to know that you can do that to save complicated selections that you know you're going to make over and over again. So then from there, I'm going to hit the chair and the leg, and I'm going to be, so just so it's clear what I'm doing when I'm doing this, I'm going to constantly be clicking on the flats layer, even though we can't see it, getting the magic wand tool, and using shift, adding to that selection to get everything that I want to affect at once. Clicking on the background layer again, Control U for Q saturation. I'm going to darken that chair down. Maybe settle it into the background a little bit by adding a little bit of that purple back in. And then let's give her blonde hair. Sometimes if you know that you're going to add a certain color to something, but you don't necessarily want it to be as intense as what you pick over here, I can hit Alt Backspace. And then you can do this on almost every filter and every adjustment that you do in Photoshop. You can either come up to Edit, Fade, and it will say whatever action you just took. So in this case, Fade Fill. Or you can hit Control Shift F, which will bring up the Fade box. And you can actually change blending modes. So if I wanted that to multiply, that would darken that area with the color I just added. Or you can get kind of, overlay or hard light or color. Like if you just wanted it to change the color and not the value, or luminosity, which would have the value but not the color. You can get really crazy with it. I just want normal, and I'm going to fade that yellow until it looks like it belongs in the lighting that we're starting to establish here. Okay, so I hit Control D to get rid of that selection. Hitting W for the wand tool. Clicking on her skin tone. And then let's find just a good generic peach color. And it'll be nasty at first. Alt Backspace Fill. Control Shift F Fade. Dull that down. And you just keep doing this until you have the color scheme that you want and every part of the image has been corrected. This, like, as much as I hate creating the initial flats, color correcting the flats is where a lot of the really smart decisions, like you can save yourself a lot of time by picking a good color scheme at this stage, rather than doing a mediocre job at this stage and then figuring it out while you're doing the final rendering. Some people can do that brilliantly, but I find that it slows me down a lot, even when it's more sometimes can be fun and spontaneous to do things that way. So I'm gonna stop here on this step and skip ahead. I have another file where I've already created a color scheme and color corrected all the flats. So I'm gonna close this, open that up. So at this stage, I've already color corrected the flats to be exactly what I want them to be. I ended up going a little bit, I think actually went the opposite of what I was showing before, where I went with a green background and a purple foreground. Whatever, you get the idea. I ended up with the colors I wanted. And also when I'm color correcting flats, I tend to have them be a little darker and muddier because when I'm doing my final rendering, I usually like to paint in light instead of trying to paint in shadows. Sometimes I might add some shadow to an area, but I find that your colors are going to be a lot richer if you start off with good saturated base tones that are already there, and then you're adding to them with a brighter values and brighter colors. Let's see. Let's talk about brush tools for a second. Brush versus pencil tool. I was talking about aliased versus anti-aliased. The brush tool is an aliased tool. It is good for soft things. So I'm going to use the wand tool to select her hair, Control H to hide it, and I'm going to this is another thing that I constantly use all the time. When you're in the brush tool, if you hold down Alt, it turns into the color picker. So anything I click on will be selected as the foreground color. So I want to find a good highlight color for her hair. Now, either you can use hue saturation, Control U, and find a highlight color that you like. Hit OK, come over here, Alt, select it, and then actually undo it. But what you got out of that was the color that you just created. Oops, I have the color that you just created is still saved. So you can start using that color that you found immediately. And this is a big soft airbrush in the brush tool. Now, some artists and some colorists prefer harder edged rendering. This is a very soft technique, which if you did the whole thing this way, would have very, and you'll see here, I'm alt clicking on her skin tone, hitting X. Oh, that was another thing. You can hit B to pick black and white. If you hit X, it actually swaps the foreground and the background color. This is useful for when you say pick her skin tone. I'm going to hit X and pick the skin tone again, so both are the original base skin tone. Like Control H to hide the selection. And then let's say I came over here to my CMYK sliders to find what like a good highlight color might be. And so I can paint with the highlight color, but if I go too far, I can hit X and have that base color back. I don't really like airbrushing this kind of stuff as much. It looks kind of tacky if it's done badly, and I mean you can use it a little bit to get like a good base in for some values, but what I think actually is more striking, and this is a taste thing. Just know that there are people that disagree with me. I like some harder edged rendering, which is more kind of graphic and kind of more graphic designy, which I like to do with the pencil tool because it is truly hard edged, and it's a taste thing, but there are reasons why you might. Oh, let's say you want to do the whole thing in hard edges, so I can hit. You can either come over here and click on the brush, hold down and get the brush or pencil tool, or you can hold down B, which would select whatever brush tool you have, whether it be pencil or brush, or you can hold down Shift B to change between the different brush tools. I'm going to go to the pencil tool. Let's say I want to do the whole thing in hard edges, just like with flats. If I started painting in the highlights, but then because it's the pencil tool and it's aliased, just like with our flats, if I decide, hey, this color I'm using I'm not really feeling this anymore, you could hit the wand tool and literally just select that area and change it to exactly what you want. I'm going to undo all of that because it's poorly done. But if you start doing, airbrush and then start going in hard edged, obviously you're not going to get a good selection anymore, which is kind of an argument for using the pencil tool if you're doing hard edged rendering. This is getting a little deeper than probably most people care about. Let's just talk about how to start painting things. I have done no work on this image, unlike one that I did in class not that long ago. I'm just hitting Control Z to get back to before I colored her hair because I want to be a little more methodical about all this. Okay, I think that's where we started. I'm going to use the pencil tool for most of this rendering because I happen to know what looks good on this artist, and that is what a lot of this job is about, is making artists look good and also following their preferences. In most pages, I would start with the background, I guess. I'm going to decide what to do with the background later. That's normally not what I would do in actual pages that are doing storytelling or have defined light sources. This is just kind of a pinup, so we can kind of do whatever we want. Normally, I like to work from dark to light and from background to foreground and build all my values up. But in this case, the background is going to get done last. Okay, so I'm going to start with, let's do skin tone first. So Control H to hide. I'm going to find a good skin tone with saturation, a good highlight color, something that contrasts with the background some more still, adds some good value range, and you just kind of eyeball it until you find something that looks kind of pleasant. So I'm going to Alt click, get the color value I just selected, and then I'm going to hit Control Z to undo it all. I have a brush selected which has kind of these rough, weird edges, which this is actually not the one I wanted. Has these kind of rough edges to it. I just think it happens to look a little bit more organic and nice, but it's still aliased, so I could change my mind about some of these color choices later. Now, taking a look again at this image, we can tell that the lighting is coming in from this direction because of the way the shadows are falling on various aspects of the figure and the chair. So I'm going to keep that in mind as I start rendering. Again, using flats. You can either, right now the flats in the background are still pristine, so I can actually make selections here. But once I start painting, I'll have to rely on that flats layer again. Okay, so select your skin. Still have the hitting B to switch to the brush, to the pencil tool that I have. And I'm just going to start rendering. Another keyboard shortcut, the bracket tools, are the bracket buttons on your keyboard. The left one makes your brush smaller, the right one makes your brush bigger. I'm going to be constantly changing the size of my brush using those buttons. So if you see me changing without having to use menus or anything, that's what's going on. I cannot stress enough how any kind of career in digital art is going to be made so much better by knowing keyboard shortcuts. It makes you sound like a bit of a snob. I know I'm coming off like a snob, but you will thank me if you commit the time. So what I'm doing now is I'm keeping that lighting direction in mind, and I'm just kind of working some anatomy, knowing this is part of the job is knowing how the face actually works and what planes of the face are going to catch light. I'm going to kind of give this bandage a little bit of a shadow there. Get some shading under her eyes. One thing you will learn quickly is if female faces look better the more economical you are with your rendering shapes. The more sketchy you get, the less, like, if they're drawn to be attractive and like kind of idealized, you will quickly ruin that effect by getting too messy or too kind of ragged. I'm not liking what I'm doing over here. One thing too with this kind of hard edge style that I'm adopting for this is sometimes it's going to be like, that's too harsh. You can use that fade option again to kind of make things sit properly. That brush stroke is nasty. I'm not going to do that. You'll see me doing this more as we go along. Right now, I'm putting in kind of a base highlight on her skin tone. So I'm just going to I'm going to do this kind of quickly. This is not as much care as I would normally give to something, but good enough for this demonstration, I think. Again, I've still got her base skin tone and my new highlight tone selected as foreground and background color, and I'm hitting X to swap between the two. If you're wondering how I'm doing that, again, bracket tools to change the size of my brush. Let's see. Continuing, keeping the lighting direction in mind as I go. I realize I have her fingernails as a separate selection. I'll have to come back to that. Else it will look kind of weird. Eventually, we'll address the fact that she looks kind of scratched up. Some of these skin abrasions will get some attention to kind of make those look like the way I'm sure the artist intended them to. Adding some shadows to these big puffy bandaged areas. Now, you know, this is me doing a very particular style. You could get very soft with this using the pencil tool, and I might do that for more harsher, like stronger highlights. The other options are with the hard edge pencil tool. Come up here and change the opacity, or if you use the numeric keys on your keyboard, like I keep telling you, keyboard shortcuts. I could just hit 33 and it changes this up here to 33%, which I've found is like a magic number for when you are doing soft, like rendering this way. And you can use that to kind of soften areas that shouldn't be so harsh. I'm going to do that now and kind of flesh out this rendering a little bit by using that highlight color just on a much lower opacity. Again, you can just get much richer and more subtle with the rendering that way. And you'll have to excuse my dog who wants out of this room. But he'll walk right back in the second I let him out, so I'm just going to endure the barking, and I'm going to have to ask that you do too. So like I was saying, 33% somehow is like a magic number that works, but you can use 50, whatever. It doesn't matter. You can just build, but I like to do this to build up values. That looks pretty good. Probably need to light this face some more, but very subtly. So I'm going to use 20%. I can't seem to get the shape of this cheekbone along with the base of the jaw. This is a tricky part of facial anatomy that I always do and redo 100 times. I'm not really happy with this there, but need to move on. Oh. And I'm just not making it worse at this point. Here's another thing you can do if you want to hide your mistakes. Come over here and use the. Ooh, you know what though? I don't know that I want to get into all the ways that you can use the mixer brush, except to play with the presets enough until you find something that works for you. It's like the old smudge tool, which you could also use for this, which I think I will use instead because it's easier to explain to kind of soften things out. And oh look, my poor rendition of that anatomy kind of goes away because I smudge it out. That is not always what you should do, but it comes in handy when you're having trouble with something. And like right now, that looks fine. I'm gonna just turn off the line art for a second, just so you can kind of see how things are progressing. I always like my coloring to make sense even with the line art turned off. Like it's just a sign that you're doing a good job, I guess. Let's go back to our pencil tool. Reselect that highlight color, and I want to get a brighter color. And instead of using hue saturation, I'm going to come over to my CMYK sliders. Even though we're coloring in RGB color space, which is what computers and monitor screens and TVs use, it's an additive spectrum where the more color you add, the brighter colors get towards, and they go eventually to white. CMYK is the color space of print, and it's a subtractive spectrum. The more ink, and best to think of it, RGB is like light, and CMYK is ink. So most comic book illustrations are going to be bound for print. It's best to keep print in mind. In fact, I should have been doing this earlier. If something is going to go to print, even if you're coloring in RGB, it's best to have your proof colors turned on. So under View, Proof Colors. This shows you what the image would look like if it were converted to CMYK, which right now looks fine because I've set it up to work that way. Like I know instinctively what colors work at this point. But let's say you use the regular color picker to create a really crazy saturated kind of blue. It even shows you right here that this color's out of bounds for CMYK, and if I were to turn proof colors off, which you can do, toggle it with Control Y. So I'm just going to do that. Control Y turns it off. You can see here whether it's turned on or not. If it's turned off, you get this extremely saturated blue. But if I turn on proof colors, Control Y, this is what it would turn into in CMYK. That may not be what you want at all. So it's best to work with the proof colors turned on so that you know that what you're seeing is what you're going to get when you go to print. And also pay attention when you have made colors that are out of bounds. You can always click on this little color here, which is what it suggests as a replacement, and obviously it's much duller. And also, I use the same, like you can change your color picker to be, RGB, lab, whatever. Lab can be kind of fun. But CMYK is what I tend to use it because also in print, it's important to control how much black ink you use, which is K. If you have too much K in your colors, it's going to print super muddy. I try and pick pure colors. In fact, all this colors in this swatch palette have 0 black ink in them. I could spend an entire hour just talking about all of that. Probably don't need to worry about it when you're just starting out. Just focus on the fundamentals of how light and color work. So coming back, selecting that base skin tone, I'm going to come back to our flats and select our skin. H to hide. All right, so I want a slightly more warm and brighter highlight. I'm going to do a softer rendering technique just to show how that works. This is a brush with the opacity turned to pen pressure on my pen. I'm using a Surface Pro, or you could be using a Wacom tablet, whatever, or a Cintiq. And that means the harder I press down, the more opaque it will come out. So even though it's subtle, adding another level of highlight to her face. We'll just keep going there. Okay, so select lips. Again, you could use hue saturation to find the color. I'm going to move a little quicker. Now I'm just going to start picking colors with the color slider. Here. Oops. Switch back to that hard-edged pencil tool. I think I will use hue saturation here to get the color that I want. Alt to select it. Control Z to undo it. And then I have that color that we just made. And I'm going to start at about that 33% with the opacity up here. I've rough in big areas where light might hit. Not being super exact at this point. And then 0 to take it back to 100% up here. Or you could use the slider, whatever floats your boat. And then add in the more exact highlights. And I'm going to do a product placement plug here because I've grown to really love this tool. It's, I think, 19 or 20 bucks. It's called Magic Picker, and it's a color wheel that you can constantly have open all the time. But here's why why it's exciting for me as a colorist. I can lock how much black ink it allows me to use. So I'm gonna alt click there and then come up here and pick a color that I know won't have it. Ooh, that's too much. Here's another trick I use in the color pick on the Photoshop color picker. This gradient down here I set to be current colors, so it's always going to create a gradient between the foreground and the background color. If you click anywhere in this, it will select wherever on the scale you are. You know, that's too much, the yellow that I picked. But, and then this is the color that I am working with. I want somewhere halfway in between. And lo and behold, we have that color. So adding a harder kind of specular highlight, just kind of paying attention to how hair reacts to light, and then maybe one level hotter just for, oops, not getting bright enough, just in places. All right, I'm looking at that. I've added that really bright highlight on her hair, which now means that if I want to keep that, there's probably a brighter light source hitting her skin. So I'm going to come back to her skin. And yeah. And basically you just keep doing this until you are like, you build up every part of the image to the level where you're happy with it and you are ready to quit. Now, and then that's, you know, basically when you're done. Now, other concepts, because I probably need to be wrapping this up, even though I've barely begun to actually render this image, is something called doing color holds, which I think is a term from the old school kind of print days, where you're withholding black ink and using color and to fill out kind of the line art. You know, this sky is a good example of something that we might want to do that on, or the smoke from the cigarette, or from the tip of the cigarette where it needs to be kind of a glow. Now, here's where having the transparency locked on the line art comes in handy. You can just get in there, pick, this is going to be nasty, I'm just going to pick this red color, and just start coloring. Now you can obviously go crazy with that. We're going to go back to what we were doing when we were flatting and select the lasso tool. And we're going to come in here and paying attention to where we feel like the ink line ought to end if we're going to turn those clouds a different color. And just make a big old selection. Again, this is where you could spend half your day doing this. I have done that. It's not fun, but it does make things look better. And I almost always err on the side of making things look better, even if it's a hassle. It's kind of probably an ego thing, but it's also what makes me good at my job and why artists like working with me, because I will go the extra mile to make their work look as good as I can possibly make it. Which is, in addition to aiding storytelling and clarity in art, one of the main things that will get you hired if you are interested in a career in comic book coloring is making artists look better than they knew that they could look, or making them look better than whoever has been coloring them. So anyway, just continuing to select black for the clouds. I'm a little sloppy with it because I need to be wrapping up soon. Okay, so I have a selection. You can hit Q to look at everything you have selected there. It's not a big deal that all the white's selected because the transparency is locked. If I filled all that with red right now, it would only do what is in that layer that I have selected. So when I'm doing color holds, which is what this kind of effect is called, I like to start with filling it with like the background color that it's going over the top of. So I'm going to hit Alt, click on this background color, Alt backspace, fills it with it. Obviously, it looks invisible. It's still there. It's just matching the color behind it. I'm going to hit Control H to hide that selection. And then I'm going to hit up the, you know what? For variety's sake, instead of using hue saturation, I'm going to use levels. So that would be either Control L or edit. Oh no, image adjustments, levels, or Control L, which is my preference. Levels is just like curves is another kind of version of it. Does the same stuff, it just visualizes it differently. I've gotten to where I prefer levels for comic coloring. For image, like for like photography, I use curves a lot more. That's the subject of another lecture. So here you can either affect the shadow tones of the full RGB color, of this thing, the highlights, which is making it brighter, or the midtones. I'm gonna just kind of slide that midtone because, like, if you can get too dark, too quick, too dark, and too muted with the shadows. Other thing, this output levels. This can actually drain highlights from something, or drain shadows out of the shadow kind of out of something. This is a good way to fade stuff together. Or you can go by channel. So this is just affecting the red channel of the image, and so if you take out, let's see. I'm just gonna do it instead of talking as much, and you can kind of. This is one of those tools I encourage you to go and explore on your own. Here's another thing. If you are just noodling around in here and you don't like what you've come up with, like I'm feeling right now, if you hold down Alt, it turns the cancel button into reset. You can undo everything you just did without closing it. I did this mainly to show you how to use this. I think I'm going to switch back to hue saturation. I did like darkening it up a little bit, but I want to saturate it and kind of keep it in the same universe as what we had. Kind of liking that, but I need to do something with the actual background. So that's how you could colorize background elements. Now you could get really crazy. Keep that. Oops. We still have it selected. You could, over here, select the gradient tool and, pick that background color and like fade it into the background, or hit, use fade, Control Shift F to do something like that. And that makes it kind of settle into the background more. Now, I'm going to actually keep that, but I want to do something more with the sky before we finish up. Find something that makes this a little more striking. A little more saturation, probably. And just using it to get the color I might want to use, and then undoing it. Using the gradient tool. Probably. Oh, here's another. Okay, so I have a hidden selection for the whole background. Here's why with the you can hit M to go to the marquee tool. I have the rectangle selected, having that intersect turned on. So it's got the whole sky selected, but let's say I just want the ground. I can draw a rectangular selection and it will intersect just what's already selected. Super great. Let's give this an actual floor that she's on. This may not work. If you're unsure about something but you want to just put something down, sometimes I'll create a new layer above, do the gradient that may look disgusting initially, and then hit Control D to deselect. But because you have that gradient on its own layer, you can hit Control or Hue Saturation and again do what we've been doing and stumble on the value that you actually want. This is not looking great, but we're already over an hour here probably, so I need to wrap this up. What else can I show you really quickly? Oh, so let's say you have other areas that you want to color hold that have already butted up against what you've done. If I'd left that cloud area solid, I could have just used the magic wand tool and selected it, but I put the gradient over it like an idiot. So what you can do is, do kind of what we were doing in the flatting stage, go bigger than you actually need. Luckily, if this is still pure black back here, I don't know why it ignores the anti-aliasing on the edges, but it does. Just be thankful it does. Hit the magic wand tool, hit the intersect, click on the black. It'll just select what you have not messed with. So click that color, fill it, hide the selection, Hue Saturation. Sometimes you might want to go brighter with things to give it an effect. It's not normally what I would do, but I'll do it here just for kicks and giggles. Other good uses for color holds, and this is where you might just start painting them in. I still have the line art selected. I'm going to pick just a cleaner brush. You can start painting in those scratches and wounds. That's not dark enough. On all the bandages. Really, you could go nuts with color holds. Like there are pages where I end up going overboard and color holding most of an image. Just depends on what you're after, what the artist is expecting. Like I said, you can go a little nuts. Let's say you want to go a step further though, and let's say you wanted to have like a literal glow over the top of the butt of this, like the lit end of the cigarette. Here's how I would suggest doing that. Create a new layer over the top of everything else, and then turn the blend mode to screen, which means anything that you do will be made, like anything you do on this layer will brighten everything below it. So pick a nice, orange. I'm going to switch over. I'm going to hit Shift B to switch over to my regular paintbrush, find my soft brush. I'm going to set it to screen. So that means even the orange that I'm drawing will get brighter the more I add to it. Screen is a wonderful, wonderful tool, a wonderful thing to play with. So doing this over the top of everything. Now, this is kind of gross the way I'm doing it. This would get you laughed out of certain comic coloring circles, depending on how ham-fisted you want to be with it. But for the sake of examples, and you'll see with the screen, like the more saturated and more and the lighter it will go, because I have the brush set to screen, on top of being, like if we turn the layers blend mode back to normal, you would see we would just like be painting over everything, but screen is actually brightening everything. You could get crazy with this, select the smoke and screen over the top of that too. If you have a If you have a good kind of cloud brush, which creating a bunch of custom brushes, also another thing that you could spend days talking about. I have some decent cloud brushes already made. Like, let's say we want it to be foggy. We just start screening fog over the top of everything. And that's the way you're going to do all kinds of special effects, is with different screen layers. And depending on how complicated you get, you may want to have multiple layers to handle all of that. That's absurd what I just did. So you just keep doing all these things. You build up the rendering on the rest of her. You do effects. And then a lot of times, you might still think, oh, this isn't quite popping for me. Let's do a little bit more adjustment. Here's where adjustment layers are super great. Come down here to this that looks like the contrast kind of icon down here, and you can use your levels and all these other adjustments. Let's do levels. I'm gonna make the highlights a little hotter, darken the midtones a little bit, and this, you'll see this is a layer over the top of everything. And I can turn it off and on, and I can even erase parts of this. This is again one of those areas where if you learn how to use this, you will be a god of Photoshop, and everyone will love you. If I start sucking the blue out of this, it makes everything more yellow and faded. This is not look good. This is not something I'd ever turn into one of my editors, but it's for the demonstration purpose. Oh, we could make it all green fog. Ooh, you get really wacky with all of this. Let's just say that's what I wanted. Sure, you're totally happy with this. You want to be done. Okay. To finalize your image for print, right now you're still in RGB up here. Do not just come up to mode CMYK. One, it will make you want to flatten it. Always have a work file, which is what I have here. You save it, and then after you have saved your work file, then you save a separate file that is your final absolute thing for turning in. And to do that, actually, this is not how I would do it for print, but for the sake of the assignment that I know that the students that are probably listening to this are going to be doing, this is what you should do. Come back over to your channels, drag any of them that are not your RG. Oh, delete layer mask. Yes. Don't know what that was. Oh, it was from my levels adjustment because I had that selected. Ignore that. Delete any channels that are not your red, green, and blue, because you don't want to accidentally have those when you save your final file. You can flatten everything, and then this is how you properly convert to CMYK. It will do a better job, and you can be really specific about what CMYK profile you want to use, which, depending on what publisher you're working with or what printer you're working with, you might want different. Under Edit, Convert to Profile. This is actually a CMYK profile that Marvel Comics has provided me. You won't have that. Let's see. One that you should have, and what a lot of publishers use, is just the standard one that comes with Photoshop called US Web Coded (swap version 2). Just leave this stuff alone. Hit OK. And that actually converts it to that color profile, which is more for like glossy paper. And if you go into channels, you can see it has converted it. And that's how much, that's an acceptable amount of black for things. Plus, it is areas where it is black, it is back to the, I'm not going to get into trapping. Look up trapping and comic book coloring if you want to go down a rabbit hole and learn way more about how publishing works than you currently do. It's part of how I finalize pages for print so that they look as close to what I see on my screen as possible. But for the sake of demonstration, just hit Edit, Convert to Profile, and do that swap thing. You'll be fine if you do that most of the time, unless you want to get really anal about it. So then I would say save as, and TIFFs are the preferred file format for this kind of work. and you can actually do some limited compression. LZW is, again, industry standard, and what that does is when there's areas like all this pure white up there, it will compress that information where it can, because technically TIFF is a lossless compression format. Look that up if you don't know what that means. But LZW can still save you some disk space if you are interested in saving disk space. Anyway, so the CMYK file is what I would recommend having as your final product for something like this. But for passing around on the web, this is obviously too high resolution, and it's CMYK, so it won't display your colors properly. I have an action that saves things for the web, but if you are not sure how to do that, let's resize it to like 72 dpi, which is, let's see how many pixels wide that is. Generally about 512 to 800 wide for comic book art, so that's smaller. And then there used to be a nice save for web feature, which I still like to use, which if you're using Creative Cloud is under Export, Save for Web Legacy. And it will convert this to sRGB, which is a web kind of standard color space. And that this will ensure that you what you save for the web will actually be what you're used to seeing on your monitor. That last part, I would say find other tutorials to walk you through that a little better, because I just did that in a rush. I've been going long enough. Probably need to wrap this up. So for those of you that have sat through this entire thing, I thank you, and I hope that was helpful. And if you have any questions, find me on Twitter at Jordan T. Boyd. And hit me up if something doesn't make sense. All right? Thanks for watching.